My name is Beth Lanning, and I'm from Baylor University, and I'm in the Department of Public Health. So I feel like I'm a lone wolf there in public health, because there's not a lot of public health people actually in this area of human-animal interaction, especially with the equine. But I've been doing this with the equine-assisted activities, equine-assisted services now. I have to keep thinking terminology, so I'll probably still make mistakes. But I started getting into this type of research back in 2008, and have done work with the veterans and studies and published those, and then also children with autism. And I have a couple of studies going on right now. One related to children with autism and equine movement, with artificial equine movement, or simulated equine movement, and then also some other work that I do. But I really wanted to talk about what does research look like, or what are the language that we use on the university side, and some of the logistics that we go through on the university side in partnering with clinicians like yourselves and practitioners and also funders. Because there's constraints that are put on us, and I think sometimes there's a misunderstanding that we don't want to do research, or what we have to do research, and are we just being happy? We want the money, and it's got nothing. Does money really even come to us? And so we're going to talk about some of those things. So I just thought it would be helpful in understanding from the research perspective or the university perspective, what are the expectations on faculty members who want to partner and do research, because I think most of us are in this because of our passion, and we know that there's a need for the research, and we're excited about it and want to be part of this team. It truly is a team, and I think Dr. Woods talked about this at the beginning in the keynote, how it's such a critical team approach, that you have to have somebody in the academic area to be kind of a partner, because of the resources. A lot of it's the oversight resources that are very helpful, and as part of our jobs to make sure that we get the information published and see through that. But we have to also be partnering off with community members and with the practitioners, because without practitioners and people doing the work, there is no study, and that's really a critical piece, that partnership exists and that we understand what each party needs in order to have a successful project. And then also the funding agency. It takes money to run studies. The study that you heard about, the very large study, if you actually look at some of their publications, that in the first page of their publications, you'll see a listing of all the funding sources for that study. Came from a lot of different areas. I don't know the total amount, but I'm sure it's probably, I would imagine it's probably 500,000 or more, or maybe greater than that, so it's not uncommon. I know Dr. Gabriel's study that she did earlier with, I spoke with her some time ago with autism, and that was a fairly significant amount of money as well. So it takes money to make these projects work, because you have to involve a lot of different people, and especially coming from the academic side, there's expectations that the university expects from the faculty member. So I'd like to take a little bit of time and talk about some of these logistical patterns and processes that we have to go through. So what does research mean to the university? So a university, typically a research-based university, and all universities are different. Some are more focused on teaching, some have a hybrid of teaching and research, and some are very high-end research universities. So they're going to put different emphasis on the different parts. But research to university is a driving force of the university ranking and status. I don't know if a lot of people realize that, but university administrators, as I should say, are very interested in making sure that their university is ranked as one of the top universities, or within the top 10 or top 25. The amount of research that their faculty members do helps to propel them into upper rankings. So research universities that are trying to move up the ranks are going to put a lot of pressure on their faculty members to get out there and get some research going, especially looking at federal funds or external funding, because that money coming in gets kept, and they track that, and that helps the university look better and also in higher ranking. And of course, then they have more people who donate to it and more students who come, and it's just this huge movement. So it's very, very important to the university that research is being conducted, and it's being conducted with funds that are outside of the university if possible, and also research that is hitting the headlines, if you can, so kind of novel research. So it is a funding source to the university, not that it goes into the endowment or anything like that, but it helps to fund research. And so we'll talk about that in a few seconds. I'm going to mention about the indirect costs that actually go to the university to help fund researching the research that's going on. It's an academic necessity according to the university. Most universities, like I said, will have a research arm, and it's part of their profile, so it becomes a requirement that the university has research. Again, not all universities run like this, but a lot of your larger ones do, and they're more and more moving that direction. It also, from a university perspective, can be a teaching method. That means that the university administrators like to see that students are involved because they realize that research helps excite the students. It also helps you to take what's learned in the classroom and apply it to the real world. And it's also, from a university perspective, is a recruiting tool to bring other students in, and then also other faculty members in, because faculty who want to do research want to go to places that do high-end research. So the faculty, from the faculty's perspective, has some of the same similarities, but has some differences. And the big key there, I think the big difference is the research topic, or what they're doing. For a faculty member, most of the time, while it's a requirement, it comes from a place of passion. At first, when you're trying to tenure, which is the beginning parts of a faculty's line, tenure just means you've got about 5-6 years basically to meet their criteria, and part of that is in research. Sometimes you don't get to do quite what you want to do because you just have to get the publications out and get the money coming in, and you have to show that you can do that. And then when you tenure, then you can shift. And that's kind of what I did. Is once I tenured, I shifted and I said, okay, now what do I really want to do? Now that I've jumped through all those hoops, what do I want to do? And I was able to think back, and I grew up with horses, and I still train and ride horses, and I thought, how can I involve my public health with horses? And quality of life jumped up at me. I said, whoa, their quality of life. And then that's how I started looking at veterans and connecting with my first collaborators. So it became a passion, and the more I saw what you all were doing in the arenas, the more excited I got to say, okay, what can I add to this puzzle? Because I can't do what you're doing in the arenas, but I can bring that research perspective. And that was very exciting. So that's a purpose and a passion part that most researchers will start to have, especially as we've been in the field for a long time. So that's a really good thing. It is, again, it's a requirement for tenure and promotion. In most institutions, faculty members will not promote. They won't make tenure, and then you get fired. The backside of tenure is you didn't make it, you're out of here, and so they fire you, and you have to move on. So it is part of it. It's a very critical piece that you can keep your job and then also promote within your job. It is a funding source. For some faculty members, part of their salary is connected to how much money they bring in on grants. Sometimes when some of the institutions, especially medical-based institutions, faculty members may only get paid 50% of their salary, and the other 50% has to come from grants. So they're actually having to, this is a very important aspect of it. Luckily at my university, they provide my salary, but then I'll talk about buyout in a minute, what they expect on the other end of that. It's an academic necessity. Again, it's part of our job. It's part of faculty members' job to be involved in some types of research. We do use it as a teaching method. My students are all involved. I have undergrad students and graduate students. We'll talk about that in a few seconds about how the students are involved, because that makes an impact on the practitioner out there, because you might have students that are working from the university and you think, well, why would they be involved? Why would we have an undergrad student being part of this project? But it is a great teaching method, and it gets them excited to see how research can be used to inform teaching, and teaching informs research, and it works both ways. And then again, even for the faculty member, it's a recruiting tool for bringing in students, especially when you have doctoral programs. We have research projects, and we hope that attracts potential doctoral students to come in. And we've all been at some point, probably in your schooling, and the grad student gets to do all the grunt work. I'm gonna get my grad student to do that. I don't want to do that, so I'm gonna off to the grad student, and I was the grad student who had to do a lot for my person, so it's just kind of a revolving door. So it's a great way to get students excited about it, but it recruits students at all levels, and it recruits other faculty members. So let's talk a little bit about what the workload looks like for faculty members and why this is important to understand it. Faculty loads, we're all a percentage of time. Most faculty salaries are a 10-month salary. Most faculty, you can push it through the summer, but most of the time you're not funded in the summer, or you have to use that for your research time. Our faculty members are set up in percentages, so our time is devoted to research, or they call scholarship. So that's another word you might hear at the university level. Teaching, and then also some universities require service as part of your teaching load or part of your faculty load. And service would be service to the department, which means you sit on committees, or you direct programs, or you have service to the university, which you have university committees. We even have a committee on committees. It's committee on committees. So we have a committee to decide what committee you're going to be on every single year. And there's lots of committees. I spend, especially in Zoom world now, sometimes I'll have 8 meetings a day. I don't know what else to get done because I just sit in meetings all day for different committees and things that they've got me on. Service also to the community at large. We, especially our university, but other universities also want you to be involved with your community that's around your university. So they value those things. So there's a percentage of your time that needs to be spent on those areas. Every year, most faculty go through a yearly evaluation where you have to present to the chair of your department what you did. Basically, you have to write up all the presentations, publications, your teaching evaluations, how much money you've secured, this, that, all the things that you've done every single year, so they can say, great, oh, you're doing a good job. And sometimes there's a raise with that, and sometimes there's not. With COVID, nothing happened. Everything was flatlined for a while. But that's what you're judged on that, basically, whether you're doing a good job and you can continue, or you need to pick it up, or you're not meeting those percentages. And it's really important for tenure, critical, going through that tenure process, because again, if you don't meet those criteria and you don't tenure, your job is gone. You've got 1 year to leave, basically. But then after tenure, it's used for the next level of promotion. So those are really critical pieces when we talk about research. It's a faculty member's job. It's kind of like the coach that has to have a winning team. You have to keep showing you have a winning team. And you can have some losing time period in it too, but you've got to win more than you lose. And that's important, or you don't have your job. So our workloads vary, and some of the faculty members that you might be working with as practitioners, if you're collaborating with the university, some of them may have a load of 50% of their time is supposed to be spent on research, and 50% of their time is supposed to be spent on teaching. Others might have something that looks like 25% teaching, 50% research, 25% service, or some are straight research faculty. And that's all they do is they do research, and they also might be the person that has 50% of their salary paid by the institution, and the other 50% is expected to be raised through grants. So it just depends on when you're working with faculty at universities what their loads look like, and it'll tell you something about what they can and can't do as far as research, how much time they can spend on the different research projects. You can move those percentages around. The faculty member has a little bit of power to do that, but the only way they can do that is by getting buyout. So when we look for instance, my research, I'm on, well, it fluctuates. It's amazing. I have my load is 25% as administrative, which takes up 85% of my time. So it's all those in administration. It looks, this little piece of paper is 25%. So in the meantime, I'm supposed to do everything else I'm doing. But the way the Baylor works, and not every university works this way, but they calculate one class per semester is 25% of your time. So a full load for a straight research teaching tenure track faculty at Baylor is you teach 4 classes a year, so 2 in the spring, 2 in the fall, and 50% of your time is on research. So it's what they call a 2-2 load, 2 classes, 2. And you're allowed to buy out of those courses to teach by getting research grants. And so external research grants that we can secure, we built into that 25% of our time and our salary is picked up by the grant. Then we can carve down, instead of having to teach 2 classes in the fall, we can teach just 1 class, which gives us more time to spend on the research. So that's a critical piece, because I've worked with different collaborators, and sometimes I know that the practitioner that wants me to spend a lot of time on this research and have the report ready for them for the next board meeting that they're having, and they're like, why can't you get this done? Well, none of my time has been bought out by the research project I'm involved with, and while I want to, I've got these other constraints on my time. So it's not that I don't think that that technical report is really important or that graph is really important for your board. It's just that none of my time's been bought out to do that. I'm trying to do this research on top of the other research I'm doing. And this is a non-paid research, which is really important because we want to be there to help and to work alongside you, partner with you to do this, but that buyout in time secures that. In some of the external grants, like the one you heard about this morning, Dr. Woods was talking about with Dr. Gabriel's doing NIH grant, you have to have buyout time in there. They will not fund you. The big federal grants, if you don't have enough time bought out, what they look at, they say, well, you don't have enough time to do this, to actually facilitate and to administer this grant. We're not going to trust you with this money because your schedule does not have enough buyout. So they really request that you buy out enough time, and they look at that. So that becomes important. So when we're talking about partnering, and like I said, you're partnering with research members or university faculty, it's important to know what kind of time that they have allocated to research, and can they do this other project that you'd like to do with them without having any funding or with a small amount of funding that doesn't allow for buyout. The type of funding matters to the university and the faculty. We wish it didn't, but it does. So universities provide internal grant. They have a lot of internal mechanisms that faculty can apply for. They have to do a proposal just like they would do an external, but it goes through internal. It means the university pays for that. So when the university pays for that, they don't buy out their own time because they're already paying for your time. So they're not doing that, but they're giving you what they call pilot money or seed money. And they expect you to have some of those that are going to lead to external funding, which means things that are funded outside of the university, like your federal grants or your foundational grants. So they would rather you get money from outside than get inside money. So they always want you to be looking for those other external funded. And again, that goes into your portfolio that you present to your chair of your department and your provost and all those that actually look at it. They want to see how much external funding you have brought in. So the external funding, they prefer external funding that allows buyout. Because what happens again, instead of having you teach, you have more research time, and they expect the grant, the funding source, the money in the grant to pay for that buyout time. And so they would rather you do that and have that in your grant. They also, funding that allows for what we call IDC, which is indirect costs. Sometimes in the federal world and state, it'll be listed as facilities and administrative costs, as F&A. What this is a charge that's actually been negotiated between government granting and also the institutions, and this is the cost of doing research, basically, that the university collects this, and it goes into, because they've allowed you space to do the research, they provide you the computers to work with, the lights, the laboratories, if you're doing blood samples, and they're having to keep those laboratories going and pay for those. They pay for them up front with the thought of recouping that money through F&A parts of all the faculty grants. So it's a recouping. So this gets quite high. For a federal grant, at our university, a lot of years, it's 40%, which means if you have $100,000 direct cost, means it's going to cost me, you figure $100,000, and that's low, to be what you need for the project to work and all the funds, you'd have to add on another 40% for the F&A that you would charge to the funder. So that's an additional amount. So what happened, just give you a recent thing, I have a governor's grant on working with motivational interviewing with professionals who work with sex traffic victims, which there's actually an animal coming into this eventually, which is kind of interesting. But I have another project, and we funded for 3 years and got our last budget And they had a budget cut, which is what happened, everything. So the governor said, well, great. The governor's officers said, this is what we've got for you, and it shriveled down from several $100,000 to $40,000. And they said, what can you do with $40,000? Like, not a whole lot. So who doesn't get paid? So, and they said, oh, by the way, because this is federal, you've got $40,000 to work with that we're going to give you, but then I had to take out another 40% that goes to the F&A, so that's what I had left with. I'm like, well, you are getting this much work, is all you're getting, because we have no money now to do it. But that's the problem with F&A, but it has to be calculated. And so the university really would like to see grants that have that. Now, if you're off campus, which means that the faculty member, maybe they're on sabbatical and they're going to be going to, I will say I'm in Texas, let's say I'm going to Kentucky to work with the university there, and they're putting me up for the semester, then the home office, which would be Baylor University, would get 17% F&A instead of the 40% because you're considered off campus. So there's a little bit of negotiation. Foundations, typically foundational support does not usually provide IDC or F&A. If they do, sometimes it's a lower rate so that they'll negotiate. There could be a negotiation with the university. There can be 8 or 10%. Some universities, and this is the hard part that people have to understand, is that some universities will not allow their faculty members to secure external funds that do not have F&A. They won't allow them. So heavy research institutions, it depends on where they are in their research. If a faculty member says, I'm applying for this, and this has to go through all the chains, and the Office of Sponsored Projects is who oversees all the research, and your budget goes up, and they say, where's the F&A? And you say, well, the foundation won't provide for that, or this funding source, they don't allow F&A or indirects. They'll say, well, I'm sorry, you can't apply for that. We're not going to let you have your time, because you're employed by us to do this, and we're not going to allow you to spend your time on something that there's no money coming back to the university. And so some faculty members are constrained by that, and they have no choice. Fortunate at Baylor realizes that foundations do supply money for our granting, and we're very fortunate about that. They allow us to apply for grants that don't provide F&A. However, they always have the caveat, well, that's great, we allow this, but we would like to see you get some additional funds. Please don't have that the only funding source, that you're only going after funding sources that don't have F&A. So if a mixture is great. So luckily, if you have a kind of a diverse research profile, you can pick up some of the others. But sometimes faculty members want to work, and you might have you might have something at your place, and a donor wants to fund, and they say, we'd really like to fund research at your facility, and you want to partner with somebody in academics to do that. And they say, come back and they say, well, is there F&A or IDCs available? And if you say no, they might not be able to. They're not turning you down. They're just because that's the constraints that they're working from the university. So it just depends on what their university allows or doesn't allow. Is anybody working at a university that doesn't allow any IDCs? We still have some. I've had colleagues that have that problem. They're like, oh, you can get a foundational grant without IDCs. I said, yeah, luckily. So the other part, one of the things I call, this is called one of my workarounds. So when I'm starting to get funding or I'm trying to justify, I'm trying to justify doing research without a lot of dollars put with it, because I remember some of my percentages is basically research. Then I tap into this part. This part of my teaching. It kind of goes between, which it does, and it's phenomenal to be able to do this. And this is where we grab our students. So at undergrad, we have things called honors theses. A lot of different universities have those. These are undergrad students who have to do some kind of research paper, kind of like a mini thesis. So they might come to you, it's like, well, if you have a really good student, you can put them on a project, and that helps to alleviate some of the time that you need to spend on the research and allows you to do it without any money. Or you can have master's thesis or capstone projects, so tapping into your master's students, or your doctoral dissertations, or having students that just come through your classes that are really excited about research. I was able to do this with Bravehearts. they wanted me to do a study. It was during COVID. We were doing some work for them, and I said, I am completely booked out on all of my time. I said, unless I can buy out time, I really can't do this. They said, well, we can come up with a little bit of money. I said, okay, cut your deal. You can come up with a little bit of money. I can pay my grad student a stipend. I can get my grad student to do some of the work, the stuff, the everyday work, and she gets the experience that she really wanted on a research project. You guys can spend just a little bit of money, and I'll make some time, I'll carve it out, and we'll just get this done, and that'll be great. And so that way we were able to be creative about it. It wasn't a lot. It was like $1,000, $1,500, but I could pay my grad student. I try and pay them $15 an hour. Sometimes we get paid $12 an hour. We try and pay them $15 an hour to do the work. And they did the tracking, she made sure the survey went out, she helped to clean the data when it came in, and all this stuff. It takes a lot of time, but I can train her to do that, and so that was helpful. So there's these workarounds that can be very helpful coming from if you're coming from a practitioner side, that if you don't have the money or we don't have a large grant to buy out a faculty member's time, that maybe there's ways of supporting a student in there that can help with the teaching, and it's been really great. So there's some win-wins that are creative ways of doing this. So, working through the process. So let's say that we've got our collaborating partners. You guys as practitioners have reached out, academic, and we've joined and got a good group together, and we're excited about this project. We found a funding source that'll work for everybody involved, so it's going to work on how much money we have there for everybody to be paid and what we need. So now we've got to work it through the system. So universities have usually some kind of an office called Office of Sponsored Project, or it might be through the provost office that does research, but there's a body that oversees all of the research. So we have to get all this stuff approved on our side for the university. So we have to put a proposal together. It has to go through a signing. Everybody under the sun has to sign off on it to make sure that it's okay. We have to have a proposal. The budget has to be figured out. It has to be approved. It has to go through that process. You have to also go through the IRB. The IRB, of course, is Institutional Review Board approval. It can go out as exempt. It can be considered non-human subjects, which is probably fairly rare for what you guys do for the interventions. But most of the time it'll be either exempt or it'll go on up to expedited or full board review. But we have to put it through the IRB. That's very important that it's decided on whether it's going to have minimal risk for the practitioner, for participants, or more risk. And if depending on how your university views the horses involved, sometimes you have to go through the animal side of this, which is IACUC. My university, the first time that they saw the horse come through, and we talked about children with autism riding a horse, they freaked out. They're like, what? And, they're used to, we have our rats inside of our laboratory, and there's mice. Right. Yeah, and we're talking about horses, and you're going to put kids on horses, and I mean, they ran through the ringer, and I think it was Reach or Rock, the two facilities that have been most partnered with me. I had to get the veterinarian's report, I had to have the shoer report, they wanted me to go through all of the stuff. I said, these animals live better than our children. so I said, they are so well taken care of, but that's their job. Their job is to make sure that the animal is being taken care of and that they have protocol. So thank goodness for PATH. Because of PATH, I only could work with accredited facilities, because that helped that there was some kind of an oversight, somebody outside of the university that was paying attention to this facility to make sure the animals and everybody was trained properly. That's huge it's all about liability, and that's huge for universities. They want to know somebody else is monitoring what's going on here, because they really have no idea what the four-legged creatures are going to do out there. So I had to have, what if something goes wrong? What are your plans? I had all of this. So after doing several studies and having them approve them, they finally said, you're not really testing the animal. So maybe we don't need to oversee this anymore. Like, yeah. So now, after I've been through it a couple times, they go, unless you're going to do something else, like you're actually going to be testing and drawing blood from the animal and things like that, you don't need to go through IACUC anymore. You just really need to go through IRB. So thankfully, after I went through that a couple of times, and we had a stack of paper and everything proving that we were going to be okay, and we promised we were. I mean, they want to know, are you going to euthanize the animal? No, that's not the. No, these are not rats in there. We're not doing that. But they wanted every kind of, what happens if the horse gets hurt? What happens if the child hurts the horse? I don't think the child's going to hurt the horse, but I mean, it was everything. So we had to have everything go. They were good. They finally let it go, and now I just have to go through IRB. So that's really important. The other important part from a practitioner side that the university person might need to know is they're going to need a letter of support. So we have to have a letter of support from our community partners that you are agreeing to allow us to do our research with you and that you are a supportive member. So if you're working with the universities, you could just have one drafted up that you just change the names on it, and put the name in there. Just have a template, because they're going to require that, and sometimes it might be, oh, I forgot I had to have it. Can you get to me tomorrow? Because the IRB people only meet certain times with calendar, and if you miss it, we could miss it by 2 to 3 months. So we got to get them in the pipeline, and this process does not happen quickly. Those committees, they're getting better, but it depends on who's on that IRB committee, how fast they process this, and when they want to meet. And during the summertime is not a time to even find them. But they're now realizing, as we keep telling them, research actually a lot gets done during the summer, so you guys need to keep meeting or having meetings to get through this. So, from a practitioner, if you had a template that was already ready, that had some of the verbiage in there, that you just changed the title of the study and who you're working with, that would really help, because unfortunately sometimes we might reach out and say, hey, I need that letter, or I need that other letter of your support, who's going to be, so that they know that you really do have this collaborative partner that you're working with. The other thing is called city training. So as all researchers in universities, we've all been through the city training. City training is collaborative institutional training initiative, and this is the training that you get in order to know you can work with human subjects. And there's all sorts of levels of this that you have, but everybody that does research of the academic side has to have city training. You have to go through this and you have to renew it because it expires. These are modules you go through. They're online modules, and you have to go through those. If it's exempt, universities, or all of us have to have it, but university, if it's an exempt IRB, which means it's only minimal risk, then all collaborators not affiliated with the university training is recommended. Here's the kicker here, for at least for Baylor, and I know some of the other universities are starting to do the same thing. It's going to affect practitioners. If the protocol has been considered to be expedited or full protocol review, which means you have to get IRB full review on that, and they have to prove it. All of our collaborators, that means the instructors in the arena that are working with the human subjects, the people, have to be city trained. And you have a certificate, and that has to be presented to the IRB. So it's like 8 modules. You have to have the basic social and behavioral research module, but what it is it's all about protecting the human subject, the idea, unfortunately we've learned in some ways from our mistakes. Tuskegee study was probably one of the worst ones, when people were coerced and not being told what was going on, and they died because of that. And so there was actually a lot of good things that came from that, but it was making sure that the human subject person's okay, that people working with them know the protocols, they understand the ethics behind that. And so this training might be something where we reach out and say, you have to have city training. And so the modules are online modules. Ours, we actually give our practitioners a link, and they can link into the Baylor system, so there's no cost involved. It's just your time in going through that. You read, and then you take questions. And the good thing is, if you don't do well the first time, you can do it again. So it's like, you take a little note and like, okay, so, but there's 8 core modules that require. So as researchers and PIs, principal investigators, we have to have a lot more. There's different ones that we have to have, but the basic one is the one that's required. Has anybody gone through city training that's not been university? Outside, so you're in the university, yeah. So does anybody else at university requiring their collaborative partners?
We do not.
You do not? That is, this is fairly new. The last couple of years is what happened. And I was told, and I see, I never know where it's coming from, I was told that this is becoming a national standard, but I don't know how national it is because I haven't heard from the
I'm kind of interested because I sit on the IRB and we're not doing that.
Yeah.
I'm the IRB chair at my university, and
You're not doing it yet.
I haven't heard of anyone else doing it.
Baylor maybe just,
Our ES has had to do it.
okay.
So it depends on who consents. So if someone's going to run the consent process, they have to be city trained.
Right.
Yeah.
The consent process.
Well, ours went further than that, and we've actually, because he's doing the consent part, but also they said that anybody who's actually gonna be working with them, the main person at the facility is gonna be overseeing. Like for instance, when I did my one study, I was at 4 different facilities. I wasn't there at all those facilities. We had a key person at each facility that was overseeing the study, and that person had to be city trained.
Correct, so
Right.
if there's multiple sites, then you would have to have a city
Right.
trained, so that's the same as our.
As yours, okay.
Yeah.
So sounds like some are more lenient than others, but this is a requirement, I think it's changing. Did you have a question?
I just want to tell you.
Oh, we're time.
Yeah,
Oh,
we're getting.
okay.
Hurry.
I was trying to do
Research,
this.
so some of the research projects that are important to the university and the faculty member, and that I think are also important to everybody involved, is that center one, impact. That's the biggest thing there. Impact. Are we shaping practices and influencing policies and impacting lives? I mean, that's really what we're doing research for. What I call the translational research. We really want it to make a difference. I mean, the idea is that what we do is not just because we're supposed to, not just because we have to, but because it has real meaning, and we hope that it'll move everything forward in a positive direction. We do that because, and we also need to get things published. We have to have published, it needs to be published in reputable journals, and we can do a whole study on just that, and whether we have impact value, whether it's important or not important. Student mentorship is really important because these are future leaders. You never know. We talk about future, I work with future PT, OT, doctors, and I'm hoping that they remember that horses and animals can be a big part of quality of life, and so I'm hoping that they're going to go into their practice doing that. Translational research, can we get it from the bench research to actually out in the community? And then, ideas, innovative ideas, meaningful work, and presentations are some of the outcomes that we look for. Key points: faculty must work within their university system. That's what we have to do. We have to be within them. Researchers are needed to support, resources are needed to support a research project. We can't do it without enough. Time allocation for a project is critical. We have to have enough time to do it well, or we really shouldn't be doing it because we don't want to do it poorly, because that hurts everybody involved. A poor research project would be better not to be done than to be done. Don't do research just to do research. It's got to be done well. The university process takes time to navigate. More time always than less time. Research publications are important for faculty, funding agency, and practitioner. It benefits us all if we can get it out there to those that need to see it and to read it. Collaboration is essential for a successful project. We can't do it. Nobody can do it alone. Research faculty want to say yes if they can. Sometimes we have to say no. We can't right now. It's not because we're not interested or we don't want to help. And we're not being selfish and we just want money. It's got nothing to do with that. This is what our life looks like. This is our percentages that we have to work with in our faculty, and this is all we can do with what we have available for the resources. Okay.
One question, beautiful presentation. There's a lot behind that. The one thing I'm going to add to that was, could you speak a few words to the intellectual property piece of the IRB?
Intellectual property, who owns it? Yeah, who owns it? That's really important, and I work from the practitioner side, both sides. We have to be really careful with that data. The data is, the university basically, it depends, like our university allows the faculty member to own the data, but we have to be very careful on where that data goes. And so when we're working with a researcher and you want to put it on your website, you say, oh, we found out this great stuff, we want to take this and put it on our website, we want to list it in our newsletter. We may say, no, you can't do that until we publish it. That's a really important, or if we know it's under review. If that manuscript, the article that's going in, if it's under review, it can't be sitting out there for others to read. You can do presentations on it, academic presentations, but is that what you're speaking of?
That and then proceeds from methods and further knowledge.
Yeah, that intellectual property, it really belongs to the researcher, is where that goes. And the university, depending on the agreement, they have rights to that.
And not the foundation that funds it.
Not the foundation that funds it, that's true. Yes.
So you pay for it, you don't own it.
Yes. Yeah, so who owns that data is a critical piece. So make sure that when you're working together as partnerships, that's something where I think that agreement is really important. What can we do with this information? Because I've had some that said, oh, that's great. Can you give me a graph and I can show it and then I can put it on our website? And I'm like, no, it's got to go in a research article and it's got to be published before we can release it. And they're like, well, when's it coming out? And I'm like, well, that's a good question. It's been under review for 7 months. My last one was 14 months. I'm like, what have you been doing, people? And they all say COVID, and so I don't know. So those kind of things, yeah. So that's a good point. I'm really glad you brought that up. It's important. Any other questions? There's my contact information. You can call me. You can email me. I'll be here through tomorrow. I'm doing another presentation tomorrow on where we made progress with equine-assisted service research. So I'll be presenting again tomorrow as well. So thank you.